The winter of 1944 was a strange time on the Western Front. The war was clearly lost for Germany. Everyone knew it. The Allies had broken out of Normandy, liberated France, and were pushing toward the Rhine. German cities were being bombed to rubble. The Eastern Front was collapsing. Rational officers understood that continued fighting only meant more pointless death. But not every German officer was rational. And among those who refused to accept reality, the majors presented a particular problem. Understanding why requires understanding the German military hierarchy. A major, a Sturmbannführer in the SS or a major in the Wehrmacht, occupied a critical middle position. Senior enough to command hundreds of men, junior enough to still be at the front. They had authority but also ambition. Many had spent years fighting, had been decorated, believed in their cause with a fervor that colonels and generals, who'd seen more wars and understood politics better, often lacked. When American forces encountered German units in those final months, surrender negotiations usually happened at specific levels. Enlisted men gave up readily. They were cold, hungry, exhausted, and wanted to live. Lieutenants and captains, if their positions were hopeless, would assess the tactical situation and make pragmatic decisions. Colonels and generals, if they chose to surrender, would do so with formal protocols, ensuring their men were treated according to the Geneva Convention. Majors, though, were different. They had enough rank to feel the weight of tradition and honor, but not enough experience to see the bigger strategic picture. They'd built their entire identities around being officers in what they'd been told was the greatest army in the world. Surrender felt like personal failure, like betrayal of everything they'd fought for. American units encountered this pattern repeatedly. A German position would be surrounded, obviously untenable. White flags would appear from some positions. But then a major would emerge, sometimes still armed, sometimes not, and refuse the terms. Not aggressively, these weren't suicide charges. Just refusal. Insistence that his men wouldn't lay down their weapons. Demands for impossible conditions. Stalling. The American response to these situations reveals something important about how the U.S. military functioned at ground level in 1944. There was a system, a process, and most importantly, discipline that held even when it would have been easy to simply eliminate a problem. First came negotiation. American officers, often captains or lieutenants themselves, would attempt reason. They'd explain the tactical situation. You're surrounded, you have no supplies, no reinforcements are coming, your position is hopeless. Surrender now, your men will be treated well, the war will be over for you but you'll be alive. Some German majors would listen. Others would argue, about honor, about orders from higher command, about their duty. The Americans had interpreters, usually German-speaking soldiers or sometimes refugees who'd fled Nazi Germany. The conversations could go on for hours. If reason failed, escalation followed. A more senior American officer would be brought in, sometimes a major to speak peer-to-peer, sometimes a lieutenant colonel or colonel to invoke superior authority. The message would become firmer. Surrender is your only option. Continued resistance means we'll use force. Your men will die for nothing. The interesting pattern was what happened when German majors still refused. American doctrine didn't call for summary execution or immediate assault. Instead, there was a waiting period. Psychological pressure. Artillery would be positioned but held. Infantry would tighten the perimeter but not attack. The surrounded Germans would be given time to think, to watch American strength build, to have their own men, cold, hungry, wanting to live, begin questioning their commander's judgment. This wasn't mercy, exactly. It was calculated. American officers understood that unnecessary combat meant American casualties too. If patience could achieve surrender without bloodshed, patience was the tactical choice. The goal wasn't punishment or revenge. It was ending resistance with minimal cost. When defiance continued past the point of reason, force became inevitable. But even then, there were protocols. Warnings were given. Pathways for evacuation were sometimes offered to civilians if any were present. When the assault came, it was methodical. overwhelming firepower designed to end resistance quickly rather than prolonged fighting. After the fighting, if the German major survived, he'd be processed as a POW like anyone else. There are documented cases of American officers who'd spent hours negotiating with defiant German majors, later ensuring those same majors received proper medical treatment, were transported safely to POW camps, had their personal effects documented. This restraint wasn't universal. War never is. There were certainly incidents of anger, of frustration boiling over, of Americans who'd lost friends to pointless German resistance responding harshly. But the overall pattern held. Discipline, process, rules of engagement followed even when emotionally difficult. The German majors who refused to surrender in late 1944 represented something larger than individual decisions. They embodied the tragic stubbornness of a regime that couldn't accept its own defeat, that would sacrifice men pointlessly rather than acknowledge reality. But the American response, patient when possible, firm when necessary, restrained even in victory, revealed a different military culture. One that valued discipline not just in attack but in how victory was handled. This wasn't heroics. It was professionalism. The unglamorous reality of soldiers following doctrine, officers making hard choices about when to wait and when to act, a military system that functioned even in chaotic circumstances. The Western Front in late 1944 was full of moments like these. Not dramatic, not suitable for movies, but revealing of how wars are actually fought and won at the ground level.